Well, hello, everybody. I am Matthew Orr of Wet Ink Games, here for another Other Ink Thursday, and this time it's my pleasure to welcome Emily Boss of Black and Green Games to this conversation. Emily is a writer and publisher and forester and resident of Western Massachusetts, and was there at the beginning of modern gaming? Question mark. I don't know. We'll find out what you have to say about that. Emily, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much. It's great to get to chat with you. I really loved participating in the series of summer webinars that IGDN has done that you coordinated for us, and it's neat to get to chat with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those time like sometimes I talk to people that I know their work well and I just want to hear about the newest updates. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I would love to get to know you because I've know of your work and I know your name and I know other things that you've been closely associated with, but I have never I believe we have rarely, if ever, directly interacted. So I was like, I should
Yeah.
fix that and call up Emily and see what she has to say about the times we live in and the state of the industry and that kind of stuff. And perspective. I don't be rude, but I do feel like you're the generation before me of creators,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
you have
Working on my hoary gray beard.
right. You're an august figure, and you have wisdom to share, and those things, and you know.
That's
So,
great.
uh, well, and but I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here. I like to start with a question that's sort of like the origins in the beginning. So, like the one I sent
Sure.
to you that I'm kind of developing is like because I asked people like, how did you get into games? And I've asked that people, tons of people have answered that question. So, like the one I think is the new kind of like starting point is like kind of getting at the same thing from a different way is like what is your sort of baseline of an RPG? When you think of like what is an RPG, what's the
Yeah.
book that rises up first? And I assume that's going to be something that you was a formative one for you, but like I don't know, what is a baseline RPG for you? What is a definitional item or a would be in the picture in the dictionary definition, you know?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's twofold. I was given one of the original D&D box sets and had the little die that you could like color the
Mm.
number in with a crayon and stuff. And I looked at it and I loved it. And like the only time I actually got together with friends, with like the older kids in high school who were playing it, we got together, we sat down, maybe we made characters, and then we just sort of like futzed over what to get on the pizza, like what pizza topping to have, and then never played. So that was my D&D experience as a youngin. And then the major like baseline for me, you had talked about like is it D&D, vampire. That was huge. The White Wolf was giant during the 90s when I was, in college and so on. And Shadowrun even that other people were playing that. But for me, the like central quintessential game that like brought me into it all was Ars Magica or
Mm.
Magica, however is appropriate to say that. That was the game that just like devoured my creative mind that a bunch of my friends had hacked because 90s homebrews, that was the
Yeah.
way it happened. We're kind of back in that world again. It's been very interesting. Um, but like, so one friend had taken GURPS and sort of merged it with Ars Magica. And then I played with other friends, Meg and Vincent Baker, and we were just like, all these rules, blah. Okay, the magic system, the world. All right, we are in. Yes. And so a mostly system free or improvised system, Ars Magica is my absolute baseline. And that's the game set that I've played for the longest. I played one campaign for like what was it? Like 6 years, 8 years, something very, very long. 3 players. And I've played in other campaigns for multiple years that were using that world, but adapted to a newly generated world that had nothing to do with the published stuff. Um, And then the major thing too for those games was that we all played multiple characters,
Mm.
many, many, many characters, not just like me and, my valet, but like, you play the mage, You can play a Grog who's a soldier. You play the Pickler. You play the person who's the Dyer. You play somebody who's in another covenant who's trying to like fight with your mages. You play like the people who hate mages in the country next door who are trying to attack and kill you. You know, like that was the kind of play that was
Mm.
normalized in the groups that I was with. So I really miss that, honestly.
I mean, other than, I mean, that sounds like I have played in one campaign that was similar where we had multiple characters and it was a military style organization. So it was like, okay, which of your three characters do you want to take on this mission? And it's like, oh, well, this guy's got the best camouflage. So like I'm gonna pull him off of the stack and we're gonna go off on the mission, you know. And
That's cool. Was
it
that like
it's
Delta Green or something, or was it a
uh
an
so
original game or
that's it's a game called Splicers, which is a
oh neat.
Palladium game, and it's like everything is alive. All your weapons and stuff are alive. They've all been genetically engineered by like weird space aliens, and you're fighting robot hordes. So it's like it's
Wow.
Terminator, but you have living
Ah,
weapons, and everything's like gross tentacles on it, or like chitinous armor or whatever. It's everything is
yeah,
alive. So it was, yeah, Splicers is a big game for me in my time. But that's,
nice.
yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't need to talk too much about that game, but that's,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, I like that. You don't get that experience very often of having that sort of like persistent world, and like, you would always kind of check in with your characters, like, oh,
Yeah.
your one character was off doing the mission, like, tell us what was happening back at the home base and with these other characters, or, like I mean, that's how like apparently, Blackmore and Chainmail and all those were originally played, like back in the day. They
Oh,
were more persistent that way.
that's interesting. Yeah. Oh, I've gone back to that well many times for design, but the one that
Mm,
sort of captures it the best for me is my game called Misericord. It's got a parenthetical E at the end, and it's sort of a medieval European setting, a non-existent Eastern European country that sort of is a crossroads for Asia and Western Europe. And it's not actually Earth. It's sort of like inspired by that. But that
sure.
is, it's oddly a game that is written to be played in just an hour or two. The character creation is you choose a name and then a moniker like Gerald the Bald, like
Mm,
something like that, an epithet. Um,
very
and
medievally sounding.
yeah, exactly. And it's meant for it to be really quick to set up so you can play in a couple of hours, like, after dinner or something, and then next time somebody else runs it. But you can have that persistent world. There's like lineage trees of the different guilds. You're playing guild members so that you can like, have a character come back or have their apprentice be in another story or something and take notes. And I actually bring that. It's my favorite game to bring to cons to
Mm,
run because I, as the facilitator, get to have that persistence. So like I've had characters get generated in one game, and then I tell people about them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Elizabeth the Throne Grinder. Yeah, that sounds like a great villain. Let's find out what happens to her." And so she went from being like this terrifying, like, general who's attacking the city of Misericord, um, to being captured, to being a prisoner of the mages, to being apprenticed by one of the mages. And it was just this delight of like these independent tables with different people, no overlap, just sort of like were inspired by this NPC. Well, essentially she was an NPC, if that is what, I don't even know how that works in these games since you're not playing anybody as your base character except the guild members. But anyway, it was really fun to see that design goal sort of
mm,
become real. And I not in the way that I envisioned where I thought that like friends would use it and then over time sort of just patch it together, but I got to see it happen because I
yeah,
was playing multiple times with different groups. So that was really
yeah.
cool.
I did inspired by a West Marches idea
Oh
last
yeah.
year where I had a rotating cast of players come in and but like I was the only one who was in every game because I was the, it's my game world. And so it's like I could drop hints about what other characters had done, or, somebody saved an alchemist in one thing. So then the next group got some cool equipment because the alchemist didn't die because the previous group had saved them, and they didn't know any of that stuff but it was my fun because I was leading through the world.
That's
And
awesome.
that's on my YouTube, so the viewers can see it, right? That's the
Oh,
idea
that's
is that like I
awesome.
recorded all those
Captured.
games so that like
Yeah.
the not only do people see that was for our raccoons game, Garbage and Glory, but anyway, it's so neat to be that position. But like this leads me back to like you're talking about your design goals in this
Yeah.
game, and that's like, and you mentioned homebrew before, so it's like there is a theory that like if as soon as you start game mastering a game or a game, you become a game designer because you immediately have to create NPCs and decide how to manage timelines and stuff like that. So there's like this very close relationship between that.
Yeah.
But there is still sort of a leap into like, oh, but I'm going to design my own game.
Yeah.
Um, it's so like, what inspired you to make that leap? Like, were
Oh,
you
yeah.
already like writing stories, or were you does that come from theater or art, or like what is the
Yeah.
spark that's like, okay, this is pretty fun here playing Magica, but like, but it would be even better if it was set in fantasy Eastern Europe, and I had generational, like
Yeah.
what inspires you to actually start making games?
Communities for me,
Mm.
100%. I going back to my own, creative youth, I read everything I could possibly read, like reading on the bus to school, reading during class, all that kind of thing. So I've been a voracious reader my entire life. And I didn't actually start role playing, like I said before, until college. I didn't do it at all in high school. So I didn't really write per se. Like some people are just writers from be ever. I became a writer like in my 50s. Um, but I've been writing role-playing games for that whole interstitial period.
Yeah.
And so um I love theater. It's fun. I love to go to it. I was, in uh, theater drama club or whatever, a
Yeah,
little bit
drama
in high
club.
school, but I was never like deeply into it. I've actually gotten more interested in it since I've started doing LARP and just thinking about the ways that one can present material or help people get into character. But for me, really honestly, it was role-playing games. That was the like critical piece in terms of narrative design, thinking about how to immerse people in story. Um, I think that the way that I read does match now that I've become a writer as an older person. I realize that my writing is 100% inspired both by role-playing games and how I read, and that I just visualize a lot. Like when I'm
Mm.
writing, I feel like I'm transcribing what I'm seeing, and so for role-playing games, I like see the characters even though maybe I don't see them 100% detail, but it's very visual for me. And so I
Were you the
had
note taker of your party? Like, is that
often
a
often it was,
figure?
but not always. There are other
Yeah.
people who are like, on top of it, but I do for myself often take a lot of notes because I can't remember the narrative if I don't have something to remember, and it does help me to write those notes.
Hmm.
Um, but I had two major communities that absolutely brought me into role-playing games and design in both those ways that you're talking about, formally as a designer and then informally for homebrew. And that was the folks who introduced me to Ars Magica, and that was dear friends who I lived with in college, during those crazy years where, we like piled 11 of us into a five-bedroom house with like dogs and cats and rabbits and fleas. And, um, this was the 90s again. So it was, we had ashtrays that were just overflowing with cigarette butts. And we were all young. And so we could like stay up all night role playing and
Yeah.
like go to class late or whatever. And those were the folks that did that original world using the structure of Ars Magica and did intense, like you said, lineages. My lineage trees were inspired by a good friend who did the mages lineages from the founding of all the schools. And so we had all this juicy stuff to dive into. It'd be like, the school Minari or whatever would be like M1, M2, M3, and those are all the mages, and she knew where they were. And then we could just like jump in, kind of like playing microscope,
Yeah, I
and
was going
just,
to say it's something like
who's
microscope.
this? Yeah, exactly. And again, that's from having like time on your hands
Yeah.
and friends who have similar interests and just, I don't know, being a little bit nutso and like, willing to do the deep dive and fixating and then the other community was the Forge, which was the online community,
Mm.
indierpgs.com, which actually was had some relationship to the folks that I knew that the group that I was playing with. Were involved in the Usenet groups, RP, RPG advocacy, fantasy. It's been so long, I can't rattle it off anymore. But that was a really wonderful community. So for me, it's very tied up in really meaty conversations about how the games work. What are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish at the table? How do you communicate better about those goals? How can we push the boundaries about what we're doing? This was in the 90s, so really that's only 20 years after the inception of this particular activity in its current form, although it has a lot of relationship to a lot of other media. Um, so that was pretty early, I guess. And then the Forge period was in the 2000s, and that again was in a lot of really wonderful, like just we were in there. We were like swinging fists and fighting over
Right.
concepts.
I,
And that though the focus rather than play was on publishing and
mm,
design in a formal way for a larger audience.
yeah.
And I mean, I think it was a little prescient because that's so much more available, and there's so many tools for people to use that. I love seeing the itch.io community
Oh
just
yeah. Yeah.
flower.
Well,
So great.
yeah, I mean it's it's never been it's never been an easier time to make a game. Even a printed game, even a one that looks good, there's just over the last, you know, I've only been I've been in the industry for about 10 years, and even in that amount of time, I feel like it's gotten only easier and easier to assemble the talent pool and make something and raise a little bit of money to pay everybody and then get it out. And
Harder.
there's stores that are looking for, there's end user shops like retail. You can just call up people and like, hey, I've got a stack of zines. Can I bring you 20 of them?
Yeah.
And people are like, yeah, we got a whole zine rack over here just for people like you. Like, please bring them in, and uh,
Yeah.
and I assume that has not, I mean, zines have always existed, but like, I'm not sure that
Yeah.
the specific sort of like where's the zine rack at the friendly local game store, that is relatively a new phenomenon, but like then it's like I mean, this is something I want to ask you about later about perspective
Sure.
on it, but like it's almost too good, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to make a game that there's just so many games. You were talking about you used to read everything, and I'm like you didn't, this isn't what you said, but what I thought you were going to say is that like I had read all the games. There were only like 50 role-playing games and I read them all. And then like, but now you could never, like 50 role-playing games came out last month. You can't read
Yeah.
them all anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's true.
and so it's almost like spoiled for choice. And then how do you get seen in that busy marketplace? And I want to ask you some of those things about that. But like, I want to a, I want to take a step back before we get there and talk some more about
Yeah.
the origin and like the community side, the aspect. Like you mentioned very much in passing, Vincent and Meg Baker.
Yeah.
I've got this arrived at my house. This is Defy the Gods by Chris Sellers, and it's using PBTA, but like
Beautiful.
based on what Thirsty Sword Lesbians did with it, and based on
Yeah.
what Monster Hearts did with it, and based on what Monster of the Week did with it, and back
Yeah.
ultimately to Apocalypse World. It's we're in PBTA has gone on and on and on, and so like
Yeah.
I know I mentioned that only as like those are the people that you were like. oh, yeah, my friends that they did this thing, and
Yeah.
like I, I, I don't want to make you talk
It,
about that other system, and because they're on every podcast, and
yeah.
which is great, and but like that story's been told, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
existence of that PBTA and stuff is not a surprise. It's just it has
Right.
gone on, and so like it is. Is there something in the water? Like, what is
Oh
it
yeah,
that
yeah,
like makes
yeah. Western
that
Mass.
area where you live, like you've got it, and like your husband designed Dread, and
Yeah.
like these are games that like in that early 2000s period are just transforming what role-playing games are for the majority of people.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you've like Jason Morningstar is the other one. His Fiasco is another one that I put
Yeah.
up there as like the beginning of doing games in a different way. And
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure you know Jason. But
Yeah.
I know Jason doesn't live in your neck of the woods. But it's like when you say community is what led you into it. It's like
Yeah.
is that how did that happen up there? And I guess the other one I
Sure.
should mention is I've become kind of friends with the Turtle Bun people, Evan
Oh
and
yes. Evan and
and
Hannah.
Evan
Yeah.
and Hannah, and like so like I know they're in that same area as well. So it's like there's like a lot
Absolutely.
of teams of creators that are working together in that area. So it's like, you're doing something great. Don't change it. But like, what is it about the area where you are, where like there's all these strong designs coming? I think
Yeah.
of it as like, I think right now, Philly is where like the hottest
Hmm.
game designs are coming out of. And like,
Oh, that's
obviously
cool.
in the generations before, it was Southern Wisconsin because that's
Yeah.
where TSR was. But like in the 90s and 2000s, it was Western Massachusetts. So like, what do you attribute to this? Or do you attribute it? I don't know. Like is there something
Yeah.
different there? Like,
Well, I mean, one thing that is not necessarily attributable, but it is probably not in isolation, and sort of with the perspective of years, want to look back at this. But one of the reasons why I moved to Massachusetts was because we have something called Mass Health. And so everybody always was able to have insurance.
hmm,
So if you were not able to pay for insurance and were at a certain, income level, you were covered by the state. And, Massachusetts has sort of led, I don't know, our weird course forward in making sure that everybody has insurance in the United States. It's still far from perfect, but some of the policies that Massachusetts put into place were enacted across the country. And that's not nothing. There was
yeah,
also free buses here. When I was going to college, I lived in a tiny little apartment, and then I took a free bus to my university. And so I was able to afford to live here. And other friends did the same thing. So I don't know if it's in the water, might be in the woods. I am a forester. I could
yeah,
attribute
yeah.
it to woods, but it definitely is a state that has a certain amount of dedication to providing a social safety network for its people.
Yeah. Well,
Um, and anyway, beyond that, the thing that I
that's
usually talk
enough.
about,
That's
yeah, I know.
but
I
yeah.
mean, it's like the Nordic countries too. That's
Mm,
a wellspring of artistic creativity in our field, right? Tabletop
sure.
and especially LARP. And same thing in those countries. So, um, I don't know. I can't say about North Carolina or the Pacific Northwest or Southern Wisconsin, but like at least for here, I know that
Yeah.
was one thing that made it possible for a lot of us to maybe be a little more experimental than we would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
But the big thing really was community. And so I met Vincent and Meg at the same time. I met them before they were married. We were all in college. And I met them through a friend of a friend of a friend. I was in UMass Amherst. They were at Hampshire College. Um, and so, just sort of friendships spring up.
Yeah.
And another thing that we tried to do here was to have little mini cons. Once I had been role playing with friends. Meg and Vincent were also in a part of the campaign that I talked about earlier, the Ars Magica. Ars Magica was also a game that was very fundamental for them independently. And then we joined together and did great things. Um, and we made some small mini cons inspired by having gone to Gen Con. The Forge community online also created an in-person community where they would, just get together and everybody would put their money together and have a booth at Gen Con.
Yeah.
So it was a place to have visibility for these games that were wacky little crazy indie designs. And people who were in the media, like Ken Hite, was kind enough to be interested in these crazy things. And that gave some of us a lot of visibility. Epidai Ravishal that you mentioned, he's my husband. He wrote Dread with a wonderful team of folks that he has published it with. Um, and my game, Breaking the Ice, which was my first published game, we were both mentioned in Ken Height's Spotlight article in the Gen Con book. And that was huge for both of us. So it
Yeah.
was getting that, being able to go to a place like Gen Con because we had a community that allowed us to have that entry point, working together and seriously all putting our shoulders to the wheel for one another, like a
Mm.
1000% for me. Epi didn't go through the Forge path, but he later was part of other groups that had booths there. But for me, it was amazing to be able to like truly be there, hawking the wares of my buddies and knowing
Yeah.
that they're going to have my back and do the same thing and raising, all ships being raised by that same tide. At that time, there were few enough of us that there was not much of a sense of competition. It was really just a matter of any of us getting on anybody's radar, helping
Yeah.
out. And
Yeah.
there were certain games that did really well and others that maybe sold a couple, so it was a variance there. But and then here coming when we were going to Gen Con, after hours,
Mm.
people would get together and just play the games.
Yeah.
And that was like my favorite part. It was so fun. I get to like try out crazy stuff and meet people and hang out and have a meal. And so coming back to Massachusetts, I personally really loved that atmosphere. And so worked with friends to do that here out in Western Mass, and we did some in Eastern Mass, and we called it JiffyCon. And it would just be like, called JiffyCon because it was gaming and a quick, good game, great gaming in a jiffy. It would be
Mm.
one day. We'd like, mostly we'd rent out church basements and have it potluck initially, and just maybe we'd
It's
buy some coffee and
yeah.
just game for the day.
Yeah. And that's yeah, it is I find myself when I go to cons, I'm too busy to play any games, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate, right? Because then it's like, but here's all the people, and like we do hang out and we do go to dinner and we talk about games, but then you have to go to I feel you have to go to bed because you got to get up and do it again tomorrow and
You
like
do. You can't burn yourself out. Yeah, exactly.
but plenty of people play games at cons, but it
Yeah.
is something that I don't do too much, but like I can imagine, yeah, you just gotta make it happen. You just go like, well, let's have a game day and let's make it happen, and um,
Yeah.
because it is so valuable to play the games, like discussing the games or discussing the business of games it's a whole own
Really.
form of entertainment. But
And
then,
finding collaborators, finding people who have similar visions, a lot of collaborations came out of those. We also intentionally framed it that we wanted people to bring their games in progress.
mm,
So, we would just mark it on the schedule, but it would say this is a play test.
yeah,
And everybody coming mostly would be designing their own games too. So they all came with the right attitude where they weren't expecting it to be done and then could be good collaborators and
yeah,
supportive. And the other
mm,
piece that we tried to do, which is more difficult now for good reasons, is that we tried to make it accessible for people who had children, which also breaks down some gender barriers.
mhm,
So we're in a church basement having our potluck. Oh, wait a minute, there's Sunday school classrooms there. So we would hire a couple of teenagers to watch the kids. Maybe they'd watch a video. And then, people could come and participate, and both the parents could do it instead
yeah,
of like one having to watch the kids or one not being able to come or, whatever the family arrangement was.
yeah,
And that made a huge difference, I think. And these days, it's more formalized. You need to make sure if you're doing any kind of event like this, you'd have to have a nonprofit or some other entity that's doing it. So you have volunteers. If you're having people watch kids, you have to make sure that they're appropriately
Right.
screened. And there's a lot of things that you need to have insurance for the events. We would actually work with local comic or game stores and just have them do an insurance rider for us for the day for an event. And that was really nice. And then sometimes they would come and sell games. And a lot of those comic stores, or not comic stores, the game stores, they'd have this immediate audience for indie games. So that really worked because we
Yeah,
were
yeah,
we were creating a demand and providing an audience for the store by having this event happen.
yeah.
And the other really nice sort of emergent thing that happened was it was just a day. We would usually have lunch together. And then also people would maybe be coming in from out of state, so they'd stay overnight, like, and just stay with an acquaintance or a friend. Or so there became more of it that was happening that was a halo around the event. And since
Hmm.
it wasn't like hundreds of people, it was usually dozens at most of people, it could be accommodated, and then people genuinely had time together so
Yeah,
that instead of just coming, playing a game and leaving and not knowing anybody, usually you would walk away with some new friendships.
yeah,
And that was really like a community building aspect of it rather than
yeah,
simply marketing or play.
yeah. I've been to a couple years in a row. I've been to a house con that was
Yeah.
it's like that, and like I didn't have that far to travel. People traveled from a lot farther than I did, and like just like you said, there's a number of beds available in the house or in the hotels around, and like people are there, and like you're there all day, and like if you were close you can be playing card games by 10 a.m. Before other people are downstairs from having stayed up too late the night before, and then we played several. There were three tables in the house, and
Yeah.
shout out to Janet and Mark who hosted this event. They're calling it Janet Con. Yeah, it's amazing because like these are the people who I see at cons and like, oh, hi, I'm friendly with you. But like now we've sat next to each other for 3 hours and like strategized about how to, you know, have the space bolts blow off in just the right way that will not, that will eject the plasma grenade before the whole ship is destroyed, so the next time I see that person at the con, I'll be like, hey, we survived that space disaster together. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, it is so. I mean, I don't know, like you've got the pandemic years and all that kind of stuff, and this is
Yeah.
kind of leading almost into the next question that I kind of wrote down. But like, first off, thank you for sharing all that. Like, that's such an amazing thing, and you're talking about it. It seems to have led to so many other things, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
model that you're talking about with the Forge, it's like the model that the IGDN has used, a
Yeah.
similar thing. Like, just
Yeah.
be at Gen Con, and all the members' products are there, and you can buy the indie
Exactly.
games, and it becomes like a place to go to get them. And Metatopia is the big famous playtest convention. It's a whole thing, and like you were already doing all of that stuff. You
In a
know,
very small way.
well,
It's
but
really
but
great that so many people have taken these ideas and run with them.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but like there is, like you were saying, it's sort of like it doesn't need to become Gen Con, right? But
Yeah,
you can do any of this stuff on a smaller scale and have it be because Gen Con it's incredible to be there with that many people and know that there's that many games being played and like 1 million player hours or whatever over the 4 days or something ridiculous, and but like I just made that number up. I don't know. It's got to be something like that though. It's
I
a
like
lot of
it. They
it's a
should
lot of
use
player
that.
hours. But like I didn't calculate it, but like it is even it's many hours of games get played. And
Exactly.
then there's a LARP and it's 4 hours long and there's 60 participants, and so that's a ton of hours, right? I mean, it adds up very quickly. But like it could be, but like 24 people can have, I mean, you're
Yeah.
not interacting with 70,000 people. You're still
Right.
only interacting with 4 to 6 to 8, maybe 20 at a time. And then you could do that without the other 60,000.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, more local cons. Let's have them.
Yeah. I'm a proponent. If you
Yeah,
can do it, if you can swing it, it's a really sweet time. And it
yeah.
just it also just gives you I went to a small fandom con 2 weeks ago, and somebody gave me a great concept. They said the big cons, like Dragon Con or Gen Con or whatever, they're the cons, or like, all the Comic Cons things. But when you go to some place that's like 300 people, which is what this one was, that's what they call a relaxicon, where you just get to hang out and you have
Yeah,
a nice time and you're not overwhelmed by the people. It's very high quality, I think,
yeah,
experience.
yeah. The uh so uh, so this I'm going to use so like I think another challenge right now is we have right because I'm thinking about like oh yeah I could probably call up tw 2 dozen of my friends and organize this and rent the thing. And then I'm like, or I could just not, and I'll continue just to chat with them on Discord and like we'll talk about how we
Yes,
should play a game. It's so much easier to just not. And so
it's
like
true.
I think there is something you have to be driven to do it in some sort of way, and that can come from all kinds of places, I guess. But like I think another factor that plays into that is like the post-pandemic way that the impact of gaming, so many more games went online and then like the stayed online or,
Yeah.
on one respect, like I can play with people in multiple time zones because it's online, but then like, do I actually do that? And, like there is sort of this impact, and I don't know that it's good or bad. I don't know that it can be definitively determined if it's good or bad for what has happened, but I think it is definitely a change in how games are expected to be interacted with over since the 2020 pandemic. Um, so that's just hanging there in the air, I guess. It's not really a question, but like related to that, I think a lot of your games really focus on you mentioned LARPing and this community aspect and like developing a game out of a community and then playing it with the community and oh,
Yeah.
I want to bring back these characters. You've got these very community oriented play and that's a comes through in a lot of your work. And the you romance and stuff like that. It takes at least two to have romance, like I guess you could love yourself, but whatever like. Um but like the other thing that's happened, I think, and I think 2020 does not, there were solo games before 2020, but like I think
Yeah.
solo games have also, they continue to be very popular over the last few years. I've written some and I've played quite a few, not as many as some people, but I'm getting up there into the 40s of different games that I've played and that are in that style.
Wow.
And I like them, but you don't need anyone else. You don't have to deal with anyone else's schedule. So again, it becomes like this
Yeah.
sort of, it is a different art form and it's not bad.
Yeah.
I do like the process of designing and thinking about like one person experiencing this, one person telling the story.
Yeah.
But I think it's another thing like that post-pandemic sort of era that we live in where it's like taking people away from each other.
Mm.
Oh, but like not necessarily because you're more intimately communicating with what the designer did or you can be if it's a well-written game. So like I've put out two topics now. So like please react. Like is
Okay.
online gaming bad for the industry or solo
All
games
right.
bad for the industry? Are they good for the industry? Are they not neither good nor bad? They just are. And I don't know if you have thoughts about like where I really want to hear about solo games because they've been so popular and I don't know if you engage with them at all or enjoy them, but do you have thoughts?
I love solo games. I haven't played as many, but I think they're wonderful. I mean, when you think about the experience, right? There's these things called books,
Yeah,
and people read them alone.
that's true.
Um, so there's, that's here's a bigger thing. A lot of times when people talk about role-playing games, the thing that they talk about is like one aspect. Are we talking about the tail of the elephant, the ear of the
Mm.
elephant? And I'm sure I'm just, grabbing some part of its anatomy, but what I like to think about is that it's part of the narrative mediums that presently are available to human cultures, right? There'll probably be a million more in the future. I got this fun book. I know this is a total tangent, but I got
Oh.
this fun book I love that's about English history, and it has an outline of what mediums people wrote in
Mm.
through. at time, and like it begins with epic poetry being really huge,
Yeah.
and then it's great because then that kind of disappears, then it comes back when you get to like Milton, and the Fairy Queen and all these other things. And so I would love to see this timeline expanded to our time, because then you'd see role-playing games,
Yeah.
right, and video games. um so where does that leave us? It's a medium, right? So having
Yeah.
a solo role-playing game is another aspect of the medium that hadn't been tapped as much, although it goes right back to the start, because I don't know. I don't know. You can talk to an expert like Shannon Appelcline or somebody who can probably
Sure.
quote you chapter and verse. But like in the earliest or early D&D, one of the things in it was a solo adventure to teach you how to play the game.
Hmm.
And isn't there like a movie about Heather, the cleric who gets killed, and then you're going after the villain who kills him? Yeah, at any rate, there's like there was a experience people would have by going through that solo adventure where they'd be like, for Heather. Um, and um, it's a thing that was just maybe a throwaway as a tool to like teach you how to play, but it's a quintessential element of the medium of
Hmm.
expression of role-playing games that maybe got set aside for a long time. So it's really awesome that we're
Yeah.
in this time now where people are exploiting that. They are going to town with making book-like RPGs where you can just have this experience, and or like Tony Dowler's wonderful game where you're like making dungeons, and like you're creating this world. There's so many aspects of role-playing games that like touch on so many creative um uh elements of life, like mathematics, drawing, mapping, outlining, narrating, creating characters,
Making
coloring,
genealogies, coming
illustrating,
up with
making
languages,
genealogies. Exactly. Like
like
it's a
designing the school architect, not the architecture, but the
yeah,
like the organization, the org chart. What is the org chart of this university? Like, I want to do an org chart. Like,
exactly.
here it is, like,
Relationship mapping,
hmm
like architecture, like like the early games dealt with calculus and stuff, where you're having like your little tin soldiers that are shooting each other in Napoleonic warfare or whatever. It's really just an incredibly expansive art.
yeah.
And so it's neat. I think so. So my answer is they're great. Um, and then, of course, there's intersecting cultural events and norms and changes and dynamics and politics that can skew that one way or another, right? Like, I'm not going to say that short form videos are the tool of the devil. But then, there's some things that happen online that aren't great, right? Um, so online gaming, I think, is really an interesting topic, particularly because of the pandemic.
hmm
We were really poised to respond when the pandemic happened, because with various things like Google Plus and uh, Roll20, or various
hmm
platforms had been created that allowed people to play online
Yeah.
role-playing games.
Eh,
And so when we were all trapped in our homes, it was an easy pivot
eh, yeah.
to
So easy.
Zoom.
Like,
Yeah.
before the pandemic, my role-playing game group was using Roll20, and it was like seven people at a table, and we all had our laptops in front of us anyway,
Oh my
because that's where the
God.
map was, because the map was on Roll20 and our figures were on Roll20. And so like
Isn't that funny?
we were already doing it. And so like it was
Exactly.
like, I guess we're not going to go over to Brandon's house this week. We're just going to stay home, but it's going to be the same game, because like,
Yeah.
you're right. It was so set up because of the technology was already there.
As you were talking, I looked up to see when Critical Role started,
Hmm.
right? Because but it was 2015. But that other trend, like, just put us at this amazing trajectory to go into the pandemic, because not only were people playing with one another online, we were also recruiting larger audiences by having performers play
Yeah.
with each other in a public venue. So back in the day, Vincent, made a post ages ago talking about the social footprint of role-playing games. And it's definitely worth revisiting. And I've always thought about that in the context of Critical Role and, the other vastly popular role-playing campaigns that people have done online, streaming or Twitch or whatever. Um, and where we are now, right?
Yeah.
Golden age,
I
absolute
yeah.
golden age of role playing. Like if we had my little outline, it'd be off the charts of how many, like you were saying before, we can't keep track of how many games are coming out, how many people are coming into the hobby. Like never. If we did the numbers, I'm sure it'd be way more people role playing than ever before,
Yeah. I
um,
I think
worldwide.
oh yeah. I agree. There's no evidence to the contrary. Like Gen
Yeah,
Con, it continues to be record numbers every year, and the yeah, the creators from other places, like I think it's, like people like um I'm thinking of Diogo Nogueira, who does he's a big OSR person, but like I mean he's not the only Brazilian like RPG
oh,
person. He's just the most famous one in North America because he's
right.
invested in coming to Gen Con a bunch of times, and like he has imported all the books and stuff like that. So like he's in communication with a bunch of the North American creators, but like he goes to fan cons and designs games in Brazil, like with all of his people that are all speaking Portuguese.
Yeah,
And he actually, but anyway, it's like, yeah, it's everywhere,
yeah,
so it's
exactly.
not, it's definitely not a North American only phenomenon.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So I think solo games are a wonderful, new thing we've delved into. It responded to a moment in history
Hmm.
when we really needed, you know, contact. And it's great that we were able to find ways to do that on our own.
Yeah.
And the other thing that made me think of back in the day or whatever day, I remember, going to a con hosted by folks in um, Finland and being introduced to the concept of the closet LARP. And I was like, what's that? And it was sort of a mythical LARP. I'm sure they existed, the people wrote them, but it was basically the LARP where you were in a closet by yourself LARPing. And that was the game. You were
Yeah.
given whatever scenario.
It- it-
And
isn't there a Stone Garden LARP where like you get put in a room and told to sit there and you're a stone garden and you all sit there together for the
oh,
period of the LARP and
Still Life. It is a fantastic game. And you play a rock.
yeah.
And you're a kind of rock that is contemplating a question of the universe. And but you get moved around, you can interact with other
Hmm.
rocks, and then there are forces of nature that move you around. Oh, it's a beautiful game. It's a Golden Cobra game. It's in there. Um, and so anyway, I love that we've come from it being a half joke to,
Yeah.
oh no, of course, this can be amazing. Like this is
Well,
really great.
I,
And I
I,
did my little part again in 2011. We did a little game, not game jam, more like a challenge of like single player games. And the RPG Solitaire Challenge. And that was really fun. And it's interesting too to be talking about things that just seem so crystal clear that they're possible and fun, and then seeing people have to be convinced. They have
hmm.
to sort of get into that zone where, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't actually need a GM per se to have role-playing games. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. Oh, and one person, yeah, can have a wonderful narrative experience if you have the right context and rule set. So it's neat to get to see those things develop and to see other people push boundaries and ask questions too.
Yeah. I, I want to, there's a game that, as we're recording the IGDN Indie Groundbreaker Awards came out, and the time we have is nominated in like every category, and that's like it's like a that's like a closet LARP where you play two players on opposite sides of one door and you like but anyway it's like because one of you's been bitten by a zombie and so like there's only you've got to like sort out all your stuff because one of you's gonna be gone before too long but like you're supposed to like play on opposite sides of a door and so like
Oh, that's cool.
it's the yeah, it sounds great, and I'm sure it deserves to be nominated in all the things. But like,
Yeah,
but it just it's there's so many things. There's so many things that are you know games that are using those I don't know. We mentioned Jason Morningstar. He tells them technologies, right? So these technologies have been
yeah,
invented and like they've been keep
exactly.
being used in new ways, and it is great. I agree that we're in like a golden age of gaming and both from people coming in new, but
Yeah,
also like people doing stuff. People come in. I meet people that are like, I never paid any attention to role-playing games before, but like this is what
yeah,
interests me about them. And so I'm going to bring from where I am to the hobby and like see what we can do in that direction. And it's like, so you're making
absolutely.
games about what now? Like, because that's what you do? Like, okay, yeah, nobody that I know would have thought of that because we're all like playing, dudes in chitin armor using eyeball laser guns, like I would have never thought to do the things that these new designers are doing. Um,
Yeah.
anyway,
I will
I
make a
don't
little
know that that was
pitch.
really leading to a question, but like,
This
go
is
ahead.
fun discussion. I hope you're okay with it because I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. I do want to ask you though, you've
Sure.
mentioned I really liked you brought up the book you picked a book up off the ground and you're like it's like reading a book and like that's been a form that's been I mean, I think I've seen one of those like kids these days posts that go all the way back and like someone was complaining about books because nobody talked to each other anymore because they were all reading books like
Yeah.
right after
Yeah, exactly.
Gutenberg did his thing and like and so like books are it, so like but like it's that very personal experience, right? Reading a book is well established as like an activity that you're supposed to do alone. Like very few books are meant to be like read, although you can go to readings or and hear people
Audiobooks
read
are a huge
books
thing
and
now too, but still often people listen to them alone or
yeah.
podcasts. You often listen to
Oh,
them alone, although
I
you
I
certainly
listen
could
I listen to
listen.
so many podcasts. It's like
Yeah.
it's like kind of a problem. But but you I hadn't ever made that comparison before between like a solo game and just like a solo activity of reading a book. And even though the kind of solo games that I like most are the journaling ones where you're basically producing a story in the
So
book is
cool.
a or the game is a guide for you to produce a short story in a lot of
Yeah.
respects.
Those
I hadn't
artifacts of play are so
yeah
cool. Yeah.
yeah and I enjoy that. Well, it's you find the game in the writing, right? You're like
Yeah.
you that's where you get to role play. You inhabit a character, and I'm writing not my journal, but this character's journal, and you look back a couple pages and you're like, okay, well, I said it has seven cunning, so I guess I'm gonna try to solve this with I'm gonna describe a clever way that I came up with the solution
Yeah.
or whatever, Um,
Yeah.
anyway, so all of that is like a very awkward transition to say that like books, hey, you said that you're writing more books
Oh
now.
yeah.
So like I want to give you time to talk about that too, because
Thank
if
you so
that's sort of
much.
your current creative outlet, your creative interest, like
Yeah.
the book that you held up looked like a nonfiction book. So are you doing like
Oh yeah.
research for a new project? Like what is the
You could never guess where my game is set.
these
Celtic
for
Iron
anyone
Age.
who's only listening in, both the books are called The Celts. So
Yeah. My husband looked at those the other day and he was like, "What, is that the same book?" No, it's different. Um, yeah, so and I before we move off the other, I just want to make a pitch. There's
yeah,
a post on my website that just if people are curious about some of the earlier not stages, but groups and movements and communities or stuff, I probably a decade ago now wrote um a a um a post on my website blog that's called Theory Roundup. And it's I, I should go through and make sure all those links are still accurate. But they're like magazines that people have talked about role-playing games, groups like ours that communicated and talked about different ways to design. And So it's a fun thing to browse. So I'd love anybody who's watching this who might be intrigued, you know, about perspective. That's one place you can look. And it was a lot of fun to put together. So I'd love to offer that again as a resource because yeah, it's from 2014. So
It's
probably a lot of people haven't seen it. And I have also in the same website, I have an area where I've put articles from the last, decade or whatever that talk about both role-playing game design, some resources, a list of communities that's woefully out of date, but and then also a lot about narrative and writing and tools for that kind of thing. So, just wanted to let your
Yeah, you're
audience know that
you're
that's a
jumping
fun
to
thing
your
to,
plugs already, which is
yeah,
great. But yeah, I'll put a link to that specific article in the
cool,
description of the video, and then yeah,
awesome.
you've got a whole lot of content on your website of all kinds of different things, blog posts, like you
Yeah.
were just saying.
I like being able to capture it somewhere because it's just so easy to lose track of these things. And then I can go back and find it. And then why
Yeah,
not have it be public so other people can read it too?
right. It's there's been so I it's, you, there's a when I was first getting into games, there were all these people who were like bemoaning the death of G plus, right? And
Yeah.
then I it watched in real time everybody get off of Twitter, and then like now there's like been some shenanigans about Discord, and it's like, do we all gonna have to leave Discord? But like all these like communities have come and gone, and like, oh, it's
Yeah.
all right there. It's searchable on this place. Go there, and then that place gets atomized, and it's like where's the stuff now? It's like, well, it's on, it's Emily has preserved some of it on her blog, whatever. It's so yeah,
Yeah.
we're back to like blogs as like I feel this pressure. Like I
Yeah.
used to read a lot of blogs and like now I listen to podcasts instead. But like
Mhm.
but I'm like, but I should go back to reading blogs because like in a blog it doesn't and blogs disappear and who
Yeah.
hosted them changes and like it can be lost there too. But at least if you've got like your website that is your content, I mean presumably you can keep your content out there in the internet. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. That's again, that doesn't really lead to anything, I guess, but like we were talking about books. So tell us about books. Like what are your
All right, great. So, during the lockdown, and also like you talked about the sort of breakdown of Twitter, I've sort of stepped back from social media mostly and have been really enjoying just being with people, even if it's online, playing games directly and chatting with people in person. It's refreshing. And I can't even deal with it is beyond me to deal with the dynamics, the social dynamics of social media.
Hmm.
It is bad for my brain. Um, but
It's
I
probably
do
bad
love
for most people's brain, really.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just not making any claims for everybody else. I've just learned that. But like it's nice to have Discord and smaller communities where you can like, just be with people that you maybe know or that are from a smaller swath of the
Hmm.
larger, all of us, 8 billion people on the planet. And as part of that, during the lockdown for COVID, I don't know, I was kind of melting down and read a lot of fanfic, and really enjoyed it. Found some lovely shows that I helped champion, yeah, that Timeless should keep being on the air, and also fell into some very old fandoms. I really enjoy Sherlock Holmes and his stories, and so have gotten to be part of some communities that really appreciate those and write pastiche. And so that process, and there's something that again, we're just talking about narrative forms, right? There's a wonderful thing about uh, community or folk art
Mm.
because it is free of the constraints of capitalism in many ways. So again, there's this whole realm of potential innovation and also garbage. Like you just don't have to have there's no bar there. You can just write fanfic and you can post it on your website or put it on your social media or put it on a community maintained website like Archive of Our Own.
Hmm.
Um, and other people might read it. and then you can get some feedback. And a nice thing about Archive of Our Own and some other websites is that there's currency, technology, um, literally technology in this case, that allows people to comment, to kudo, to give you feedback. And it can be fraught also because people can be jerks. But there's a lot of social mores in some of these spaces that allow you to actually get like people just saying, "Hey, that made me really happy. Thank you." And so for me, that was a really fruitful environment to work on my tools as a writer, share things, also read, very, just like my younger self, and be able to read incredible writing. I mean, you really have to do a lot of curating of what you're finding and do a lot
Hmm.
of work to find that. Some fandoms are better than others in terms of the work that people put in to help you find types of works. But then there's a lot of tags, and trope and topic tagging is becoming more integrated into book publishing these days. It's a more common thing, partly because there's so much writing going on in the transformative phantom worlds, as well as art, videos, everything. Um, that book publishers who are always looking for new creative sources to mine are
Hmm.
looking to those things and finding those authors and bringing them on board and, taking their established audiences. It's what always happens in popular media in capitalism. Um, Anyway, for me, it was a very nice place to learn. And so I have started writing. Actually, I've been doing some anthologies, charity anthologies. I'm working on a second with a group of friends in the Sherlock fandom. And we put out one called When the Rose Speaks Its Name, a Sherlock Holmes anthology, which was a collection of writings by 30 people. And all of the money that's raised by it goes to support a charity in England that works with queer and trans youth who are either homeless or in some kind of
Hmm.
jeopardy to not only get them a place to stay, but also help them find jobs, connect them with community, just sort of help them have what they need to make it to the next stage and prosper. And Sherlock
Absolutely.
Holmes always had the irregulars, the Baker Street
Yeah,
irregulars,
yeah.
that were young kids. And part of our angle on Sherlock Holmes, all of the stories are now in the public domain as of
Hmm.
2023. And so we were like, yeah, okay, you can't deny that he and Watson are getting it on. I mean, please, everybody knows. I mean, now there's no bars. We can just have them be in love. It's okay. That romance thing comes back around for me. So having a queer Sherlock Holmes, we were like, well, let's have support the queer kids in
Yeah.
England, and there's a great charity act that does this work, and so that's been a lot of fun to do. And we're doing our second in process now.
All right.
And then the other piece that I'm doing more for myself is writing. I'm writing novels, and I haven't published them yet, but I plan to publish them independently because why not? But I
It's never
had
been easier to just publish stuff,
exactly.
Just
And there's a game I'd like to write eventually that's set in the Celtic Iron Age.
mm,
Carol Leone is what I called it. I did a little bit of playtest quite a while back with some really wonderful friends who helped. But right now, I'm just really enjoying being in that fictional place of writing novels about them. And for me, also, again, this is a whole nother related field. Like, we've got role playing here, and there's board games and video games, and then there's popular fiction, which is like a huge monster of a thing. But there's also a lot of indie authors, there's a lot of people publishing independently. And as I've done the research for fiction writing, talking with people who are in the sort of mid zone where they're a large company, they're a large small company, right?
yeah.
They're not a huge Barnes and Noble-esque or Random House or whatever, but they have their lines of like this genre that they write. They hire
Yeah.
some authors, but they're not a big house. They do all the things that we do in role-playing games.
Mm,
They're using print on demand. They are marketing directly by going to conventions, by talking to people, by, we play our games with people. They talk about their books with people.
Yeah.
Um, Mailing lists, what you said before, mailing lists are, or not mailing lists, blogs and direct communication with a potential audience. It's a huge thing in that field as well.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, newsletters are back in vogue. Like people
Yeah.
like to get things in their email. I do it,
Uh,
you know?
yeah. I get a lot of them. I don't, people want me
Yeah,
to subscribe to them, and so I will, but I don't, I, it is like
necessarily read them all. Yeah.
it is like, it's such a weird brainworm thing where it's like, I don't want, when I'm in my email, I don't want to read your heartfelt post about your walk in the woods. If you put that in a
Yeah.
blog post and I could do an RSS reader, and then when I'm in the mood to go read a bunch of that
Right.
kind of stuff, then I could do it. But like, that's, nobody can base, like everybody's personal, right? Like their personal way that they want to consume the internet is,
Yeah,
nobody can plan for it, right? Like, so I don't
exactly.
expect anyone to change the way they're doing anything because like
No.
the tools are so much, they're so easy, to sign up for the newsletter and you send
Yeah,
it out and,
exactly.
as opposed to registering a domain and having a, or, then what is the architecture of your website and, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But I get
Substack,
it, but I
another.
also
Yeah.
don't engage. I'm like, I read one or
Yeah.
two, but like, uh,
I'm in the same thing where I'm trying to make sure that I curate my inbox so that I
mm,
get personal communication and then all of the solicitations and, whether it's public, political or charitable. And then I've recently made a folder for all of the things that I actually do want to read, but I
yeah,
won't want to read it every moment, like you said.
right.
I want
Yeah.
to be able to go there and say, "Oh yeah, what's going on with this podcast that talks about spies and what's going on with this cool person who writes stories from India and
Yeah.
but it has to be at the right moment to for it to hit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I should take control of my inbox instead of just having everything in one big inbox. It's like, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's, yeah, I don't know.
It's so hard. It's just like we're living in the age of the fire hose, right?
Mm,
Just
right.
like constant, everything, all the time.
Well, is that okay? So that inspires me to ask a question about the topic that you're working on with
Oh yeah.
the Celtic Iron Age. Like,
Hmm.
is there, because of what you just said, I'm like, okay, so is that
Hmm.
the appeal of doing something that's set in the Iron Age where there is sort of like, I mean, not that like I'm sure, I assume it's set in like either what is now the UK or mainland
Continental.
Europe or
Yeah,
whatever.
both of those.
There was fewer people. There's definitely no bullet trains. They don't have
Yeah.
the internet. Um, and
Yeah.
so like, is that the appeal of it, or have like you just replaced it with like, oh, but they have spirit communication with like, the gods, and
They
it's
could,
it's
right?
all, the here comes the wild hunt, like it's like overwhelming, different things are overwhelming them, or is it, I don't know. It's just,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. What's the appeal? And definitely for me, I think the appeal is going back into our past and, sort of reconsidering earlier technologies.
hmm. Well, and forest,
And
you've got forestry here. Like, I'm
exactly.
sure the forest
Yeah.
management of like early, you know, hunter-gatherer, that transition point between hunter-gatherer and agricultural people
Yeah.
is they took, they managed the forests. Like that's some of the first agriculture is managing the forests. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not
It's telling that I'm a pagan
missing.
and a forester. I mean, and that I have like Northeastern European roots in what are called Celtic cultures, right? So
Right.
I think it's all related there for me, definitely. And also to pitch another game I'm working on, I am getting back into game design, which has been lovely. Sort of took a little bit of a step back. But another one I'm working on is about spies. It's spy related, sort of on the Le Carre side rather than the James Bond-esque kind of thing. But thinking about when I'm going to be setting that, the the setting I'm working with is in the 70s. So it's pre cell phones.
Yeah.
It's before a lot of technology change that has really revolutionized our lives. Even though it was a pretty radically different world than it was 100 years before.
Right.
Um, and then also, it's in the past, and as opposed to working with Celtic Iron Age Europe, which is very poorly documented.
Yeah, poorly
It's
documented would
like
be
a
generous.
lot of dark space. Whereas in the 70s, there's a lot of documentation which actually has been declassified
Mm,
and examined. The Cold War is kind of an era that's well analyzed. So it's sort of a contrast there. I like working with the Celtic Iron Age because there's a lot of open space to have your imagination roam and also bring in things that might be hinted at that then I can explore like, oh yeah, there's, insults from the Romans saying, oh, those stupid Celts, they don't even think that homosexuality is bad. What's their problem? And I'm like, oh, that's okay. Whereas working with the 70s, it's a different set of issues. But what I'm drawn to there is that there's more information and it's a little bit more parsed. So
mhm,
that thinking about geopolitics, thinking about helping people play a game where they can engage in some way with geopolitics of the
mm.
modern world, it's nicer to step back a little bit than to try and deal with the shit show that we're dealing with right now. And it would be one, and hopefully my goal in writing The World's Problems, which is the spy game, is to
Good
just
title.
it's from a Le Carre quote, which
Mm,
wonderfully is someone's talking to a spy and they say, you say that you're dealing with the world's problems. In fact, you are the world's problems.
mm.
Um, but
Great. Love a title with a double meaning.
yeah, exactly. But my hope there is to create something that just gives you a little bit of tools to wade through all the headlines. And because it's so like, I mean, literally like this past week, right? Like precipice of World War III. Hello. Um, it- it's never been more important to understand geopolitics. And it's also endlessly difficult. Even for
Hmm.
people who study it or who are embedded in it, it's such a Gordian knot, like how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
And so I've had layperson's interest in it over the years. So I feel like it's even though writing about it is a fraught choice because it is evil incarnate, what I'm writing about. Also I think there is some value there in having it be an interpretive tool. Because
Mm,
that's another side we haven't even talked about. Games are this wonderful, amazing analysis of media and narrative as well, incredible educational tools, motivational currency. Like there's so much richness in what we're doing
yeah.
that it's just another element of why it's cool, I think.
Yeah. Is there to pick up on that very point, is there sort of we talked a while ago about, we've talked, this whole conversation has kind of been about the different narrative forms of human storytelling and stuff like that. And so is there, when you, I don't know that I'm a very good writer. I've written stories, and I used to do the National Novel Writing Month challenge thing where
Oh,
I would,
yes.
and so I've written novels, but like, I've written first
Sadly,
drafts of
Nano itself
novels.
is not an institution we can, be happy about anymore,
Oh, yeah,
sadly.
of
But
course. The
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 impulse is
activity
great.
of writing, of
Yeah,
sitting down with the intention to write a draft of a novel as just like get to the end, get to make tell a
yeah,
story
exactly.
is everybody should try,
Yeah,
do it in 60 days instead of 30 days if you don't want to be too
totally.
insane about it. But like, so like I've done that, but I don't know that I'm good at it, but like
Yeah,
it's so different for making a game where you're not giving a story, you are giving like elements and architecture, and there's obviously overlapping skills about like research and like
yeah,
kind of storytelling. You got to think of like storytelling ideas and stuff like that to bake those into like your hooks for an RPG, or then those are your chapters if you're writing a novel. Like there's a lot of the same kind of things, but they're
yeah,
so different because you kind of just make a soup or you don't, yeah, and you don't make a soup. You like get a bunch of good ingredients on a table and you
Yeah,
tell other people. It's more like a salad bar, right? Where like an RPG is more like a
right.
salad bar than a soup, right? Where
Yeah,
it could be literally the same stuff, but like other people have to do that final step of assembly themselves, you know?
it's
And so
fantastic. I
it
like that.
feels easier in that respect because you don't have to come up with a story and you don't have to come up with a character and you don't have to
Yeah,
make it actually dramatic and you don't have to reveal anything about anything. You only like set up these triggers or whatever, you know. But then like
yeah,
I think I really appreciate what you just said about how like, but it's sort of like they're both also this analysis tool where like an RPG can be very can comment on things in a way that a novel doesn't because you're inviting people to play with them. You know, if like this
yeah.
system that I've designed is a
Well, I think they
you
use
know
different tools and
yeah
angles for the commentary, right? Because novels obviously comment on the world. But it's a very interesting thing that in role-playing games, you're inviting someone to write their own narrative about whatever the topic is. So then they not only bring their interpretation of the what's offered, they bring their interpretation of how it's offered, if that makes
hmm
sense.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah I think I was and I think the other thing that's really strong there is you have to set them up and they have to make the choice, you know,
Yes.
like to do the things like I'm going to make this move and then that's going to cause this drama in this scene because that's what I want to get out of this thing. But like you could write a story where somebody does that and you think, oh, that's a jerk. Or you know, oh, they had a great sacrifice and it saved everybody and I love that part of the story or whatever. But then like putting that in front of somebody else, like, no, you have to decide to do that is like a very different, like,
Yeah.
it's such a different thing. It's more participatory, but then it's also sort of like not everyone.
Yeah.
It can fall flat, I guess, if somebody doesn't make the dramatic choice, you know, and the game
That's
isn't
true.
set up to support that every choice is dramatic or yeah, I don't know. It's different. Anyway, like it's scratching different muscles, obviously, or scratching different muscles. That's a mixing my metaphors. It's
Exercising. Yeah,
exercising
exactly.
different muscles to like make a game versus make a thing or make a novel. Um,
Yeah.
So like, I mean, obviously you've already talked about kind of appreciating the different things that it takes, and I think it's pretty interesting you kind of researching. Did I misunderstand you? You're like you want to make the game about international politics, but you're also writing a novel it's set in the same sort of milieu, or like you're going to do
I kind
both.
of threw things together. Apologies.
No,
But
no.
I'm working. I originally had a game idea, which I would like to do, that's set in Celtic Iron Age. And but right now I've set the game aside in favor of writing fiction in that world. I kind of like was like, oh well, I can write fiction and that'll help freshen up the game. But then I realized, oh, I just really want to explore this world through fiction.
Yeah.
And then on separately, I have a game design idea that I'm moving forward with that is set in the 70s in UK, dealing with
Okay. Okay.
spies there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not also the novel. Okay. So but yeah. But
Yeah,
like yeah.
no,
I
I'll just read Lucari for now. I don't think I'll ever write it. And I guess, I think actually I don't know. There's more of me in the Celtic Iron Age stuff, I
mm,
think. Like I really appreciate and love to analyze and find tools for people to jump off into the spy stuff, but I don't think I would necessarily be able to write fiction about it, at least not
yeah.
now. Whereas, I mean, for example, Lucari was, in the intelligence
Yeah.
service. The
I mean,
show
so
this
many
is
of those guys
inspired
were
by.
that wrote that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That they really have that meat to pull from. And for whatever reason, the other stuff that I'm working on sort of like it brings out the stuff in me that I can share.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe that's a difference too in terms of writing and role-playing games. I don't
Yeah.
know. I really don't know. And because it
Yeah.
really does help if you're writing from a place of authenticity and
Mm.
personal experience as well. And that's yet another place where it's amazing the games that are coming out right now that we can get. just such a broader perspective from people who were not part of the conversation in the past.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, all right. Well, Emily, I think I've asked you all the questions that are like that seem to be I think we've had a good chat about like the state of the industry and it seems good and uh, you're doing work that you like. That's great. And I don't know, is there anything else that you want to tell my viewers about like before and then give us your where you want to be found. You've talked about stepping back from
Sure.
social media, but like where can people find you? But like if you've got any final things you want to say that
Thank you
first.
very much. Thanks for letting me yank you all over you know, artistic talk with despite the maybe the course you had passed for this.
Oh,
So I'm glad you were able to didn't mind if that we rambled a little bit. But I am really glad to be able to chat with you. I hope folks are on the lookout for the world's problems. I'm hoping to get it into playtest form this year in 2026. And I'd love to have people who are interested in like, slightly more guy side than spy side, spy fiction. And the fiction that I'm doing, both the anthology and some other novels that I plan to come out soon, are you can find information at Black Green Games, which is my home website, but the print publishing imprint that I'm using is Shield and Crescent Games. So that's Shield Crescent press.com. I have to remember. But the Sherlock Holmes anthology is there for sale. You can get a hard copy or a PDF and all the money aside from the production goes straight to that wonderful charity act in England. And then there'll be novels for me sometime soon. So that'll be fun.
amazing. Uh, Thank you again so much for being here today, for sharing from your experience and talking about stuff that you've been up to and that you've the things you've thought and the things you felt over the last the time of your career as a creative. And and I love that you're not like slowing down at all. You're just sort of like, what if I add novels to the things I can do, and it's great to like have that creative energy because I think it's very easy for people to like, get, like, oh, I've done that. I can do this in my sleep, and then you stop challenging yourself, and I don't know. So,
There's so many breaths I'll be able to take on this earth. And so I'm trying to make everyone count.
well, yeah, that's a great perspective to have. You know, yeah. Well, like I said, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking to me, and thank you for sharing your stuff. And there'll be links to the website you mentioned in the description of this video. And I don't know, if you've got if to everybody who watched this video, if you've got I don't know what's
I didn't mention the romance trilogy. I guess that's what most
you
people might be interested in, but
you
throw a
mentioned
link
it in
up there for
passing.
that too.
That's right.
That's my free game about romance.
So here's my question. I always ask for a question in the comments to try to inspire discussion. So, like, what's a novel that should have a game that's set in the same
Oh,
place, or what's a game that you'd like to read a novel about? Either one. Tell me either one in the
cool, cool,
comments.
cool.
Um,
Um, yeah. I mean,
oh yeah.
microscope is a thing I always go back to. Like,
Oh yeah.
love that. I feel like a microscope is such a great tool that should people could use for writing
Oh
any
yeah.
series or whatever, like
Yeah.
Ian, oh, I'm forgetting his name, but who did the player games and that's kind of I feel like there's a sort of a resonance there between microscope and oh, I'm forgetting his name. Let me look it up. Um, but yeah, that I think that's a great question. Um, and again, I think it just brings up that role-playing games are uh such narrative engines. I'm
Mm.
surprised there's not more connections between books and role-playing games.
Yeah. I saw because I think it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is I did see
Ian
somebody
Banks. Ian
it,
Banks, that's the one I was thinking
mm,
of. Yeah.
somebody was complaining about this very thing that like I just want to read a novel that's set in like there used to be novels that were set in like game worlds or whatever, and
Yeah,
I just want to
yeah.
read one of those
Was
and
huge, like in the 90s with D&D derived
sure there were
games
so many
and
D&D novels, and I know there are
yeah.
Warhammer novels, and I know there
Yes,
are
that's huge right now. Yeah.
but I don't know, it is sort of like I can't imagine like a Triangle Agency novel or something like that. There's so many games
Be
that
awesome.
that ask you to create so much on your own. Even a world like, we mentioned the Nordic stuff earlier, like something like Symbaroum or whatever, which has a
Mm,
very specific setting, and that could have been, you could have
yeah.
novels in there, but like what it doesn't have is, but like I want to be the character that goes and does the thing and solves all the
Yeah.
stuff. Um, that's what the game offers, is you get to do that, but like, I can't imagine having like, oh yeah, it's these characters, why these specific characters. Like, I don't know. But then I guess somebody invented Dritz. So like, I mean, it,
Exactly.
you could do it, I guess, if it was a compelling story. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
A
So this discussion has
conversation
kind of
topic for
continued
another
to wander
time.
and peter out. We'll close here. Emily, thank you once again, and we'll see you around on in the worldwide the World Wide Web.
Thank you. It was wonderful to get to chat with you.
Yeah. Bye bye.